The markets of Nexus Station buzzed with the familiar chaos of 1,000 different species conducting business across the galaxy's most important trade hub. Vapor clouds from exotic foods mixed with the metallic tang of recycled air, while translation devices chirped constantly as beings from distant worlds haggled over everything from rare minerals to illegal weaponry. The station's artificial gravity kept everyone grounded, but nothing could contain the wild energy of commerce that flowed through its corridors like a living thing. Marcus Chun moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his weathered hands gripping the straps of his worn backpack. At 42, the human trader had spent the better part of 2 decades navigating the complexities of interstellar commerce, building a modest but respectable business importing rare earth materials to alien worlds hungry for novelty. His reputation preceded him in most sectors, honest, reliable, and refreshingly straightforward in a galaxy where deception often passed for negotiation. Behind him, his younger brother Danny struggled to keep pace. At 19, Danny possessed all the enthusiasm of youth, but none of Marcus's hard-earned wisdom about galactic politics. The kid's eyes darted everywhere, taking in the rainbow of alien faces, the impossible architecture that defied human understanding, and the constant stream of languages that their universal translators worked overtime to decode. This was only Danny's 3rd trip off Earth, and the wonder hadn't worn off yet. "Stay close," Marcus called over his shoulder, not slowing his stride. "We've got exactly 47 minutes to reach the Zephyrian Quarter before their markets close for their religious observance." Danny jogged to catch up, his breathing slightly labored in the station's thick atmosphere. "You sure this deal is worth it? That Zephyrian merchant seemed pretty sketchy when you talked to him yesterday." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. His brother's caution was admirable, even if it sometimes bordered on paranoia. Kethvar has been trading with humans for 3 years. He's solid. Besides, those quantum crystals he's offering will fetch us enough credits to upgrade our ship's navigation system. They rounded a corner into a wider corridor where the crowd thinned somewhat. Here, the station's design showed its age. Scorch marks from old battles, patches where hull breaches had been repaired, and the occasional section where the artificial gravity flickered just enough to make walking uncomfortable. Nexus Station had survived 2 galactic wars and countless smaller conflicts, earning its reputation as neutral ground through sheer stubborn endurance. A group of Vaklari soldiers lounged near a maintenance alcove, their distinctive blue-scaled skin gleaming under the harsh artificial lighting. The Vaklari hegemony had been flexing its military might lately, expanding their territory through a combination of diplomatic pressure and barely concealed threats. Their soldiers could be found on every major station and trade route, ostensibly maintaining peace, but really projecting power. Marcus had dealt with enough Vaklari over the years to know they respected strength and despised what they perceived as weakness. Humans, being one of the newer species in galactic politics, often found themselves categorized as the latter. It didn't help that Earth's government preferred negotiation to conflict, a stance that many alien species interpreted as cowardice rather than wisdom. The largest of the Vaklari soldiers, his rank insignia marking him as a squad leader, noticed their approach. Sergeant Vorthak had the typical Vaklari build, tall, broad-shouldered, with muscles that rippled beneath his scaled skin like steel cables. His eyes, a predatory yellow with vertical pupils, tracked the 2 humans with the lazy interest of a cat watching mice. Human traders. Vorthak's voice carried the mechanical undertone of a universal translator, but his contempt came through clearly enough. Still scurrying through our space like vermin. Marcus kept his expression neutral, a skill learned through years of dealing with hostile aliens. "Just passing through, Sergeant. No trouble here. No trouble." Vorthak stood, his full height nearly 7 feet. The other Vaklari soldiers straightened, sensing potential entertainment. "Your species exists because we allow it. Your pathetic little world hides behind treaties and begs for protection from stronger races. You call that no trouble?" Danny's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. Marcus could feel the tension radiating from his younger brother like heat from a fire. The kid had always been quick to anger, especially when he felt someone was disrespecting their family or their species. It was a trait that would get him killed out here if he didn't learn to control it. "Danny, let it go," Marcus said quietly, not taking his eyes off the Vaklari sergeant. But Vorthak had noticed Danny's reaction and smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. The young one has spirit. Perhaps he would like to show me how tough humans really are. The corridor had gone quiet around them. Other traders and travelers sensed the brewing confrontation and either hurried past or pressed against the walls to watch. This kind of thing happened regularly on Nexus Station, a consequence of cramming dozens of species with different values and aggression levels into a confined space. Usually, station security would intervene before things got out of hand, but Marcus couldn't see any uniforms nearby. "We're not looking for a fight," Marcus said, his voice steady. "We're here on business." "Business?" Vorthak laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "What business could insects like you possibly have that matters? Your entire species contributes nothing to the galaxy except entertainment value." Danny took a step forward, his face flushing red. "Entertainment value? We've only been in space for 50 years, and we're already outperforming species that have had centuries of—" "Danny, shut up." Marcus's command cut through his brother's mounting anger, but it was too late. Vorthak's eyes lit up with malicious glee. "So, the little human thinks his species is superior? Perhaps we should test that theory." What happened next would replay in Marcus's mind for years afterward. Each detail burned into his memory with crystal clarity. Vorthak's massive hand shot out faster than Marcus could react, striking Danny across the face with enough force to send the younger man stumbling backward. The sound of the impact echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Danny hit the wall hard, blood streaming from his nose, and a cut on his cheek where one of Vorthak's claws had raked across his skin. For a moment, the corridor was perfectly silent except for the distant hum of the station's life support systems. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, like a gear clicking into place. The careful control he'd maintained for 20 years, the diplomatic patience that had kept him alive in dozens of dangerous situations, simply evaporated. In its place rose something much older and more primal, the fury of a brother watching his family being hurt. But Marcus Chin wasn't just any human trader. Before he'd started hauling cargo between stars, he'd spent 8 years in the Earth Defense Force, specializing in close-quarters combat. He trained in martial arts since childhood, studied every fighting technique he could find, and survived 3 separate conflicts with hostile alien species during humanity's early expansion into space. The quiet, unassuming trader was a mask he wore to avoid trouble. Underneath, he was still very much a soldier. Vorthak was still grinning, savoring his moment of dominance, when Marcus moved. The human's first strike caught the Vaklari sergeant completely off guard. Marcus's fist slammed into Vorthak's solar plexus with surgical precision, targeting the spot where Vaklari anatomy concentrated several major nerve clusters. The alien's grin vanished as his breath exploded from his lungs in a strangled gasp. Marcus didn't pause. His training had taught him that in a fight against a larger, stronger opponent, hesitation meant death. His second strike was an uppercut that connected with Vorthak's jaw, snapping the alien's head back with an audible crack. His third was a devastating knee to the ribs that sent the 7-foot warrior crashing into the wall. The other Vaklari soldiers were shouting now, reaching for their weapons, but Marcus had positioned himself perfectly. In a narrow corridor, they couldn't get a clear shot without risking hitting their sergeant. More importantly, they were so stunned by the sight of a human, a supposedly weak, pathetic human, dismantling their leader that precious seconds ticked by before they could react. Vorthak tried to straighten, his yellow eyes now wide with shock and pain. He'd never imagined a human could move so fast or hit so hard. His hand fumbled for the energy pistol at his hip, but Marcus was already inside his reach. The human grabbed Vorthak's wrist with both hands and twisted sharply. The distinctive snap of breaking bone echoed through the corridor, followed immediately by the sergeant's roar of pain and fury. The pistol clattered to the deck, forgotten. "You want to know what humans contribute to the galaxy?" Marcus's voice was deadly calm as he drove his elbow into Vorthak's throat. The alien gurgled and gasped, his claws scrabbling uselessly at the wall behind him. "We contribute this." Marcus's final strike was a straight punch to Vorthak's temple, delivered with all the precision and power of someone who had studied alien anatomy extensively. The Vaklari nervous system was remarkably similar to Earth reptiles. A hard enough impact to the right spot could cause immediate unconsciousness or worse. Vorthak's eyes rolled back in his head, and he slumped to the deck, his massive body hitting the metal floor with a sound like a dropped engine block. He wasn't dead. Marcus could see the shallow rise and fall his chest, but he wasn't getting up anytime soon either. The entire fight had lasted less than 15 seconds. The corridor erupted into chaos. The remaining Vaklari soldiers finally overcome their shock and were raising their weapons, shouting orders in their harsh native language. Other traders and travelers scattered, some screaming warnings about an incident in progress. Emergency klaxons began wailing as the station's automated systems detected the disturbance. Marcus helped Danny to his feet, checking his brother's injuries with quick, practiced movements. The cut on his cheek was superficial, and his nose was bruised, but not broken. He'd be fine, physically at least. "Can you move?" Marcus asked urgently. Danny nodded, his eyes wide as he stared at the unconscious Vaklari sergeant. "Marcus, what the hell was that? I had no idea you could." Questions later. Moving now. Marcus grabbed his brother's arm and started toward the nearest side corridor. Behind them, he could hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging up. Station security forces would be here within minutes, and when they arrived, they'd find a human traitor standing over an unconscious Vaklari soldier. The political implications alone would be enough to get them both imprisoned, and that was assuming the remaining Vaklari didn't simply shoot them on the spot and claim self-defense. As they ran through the twisting corridors of Nexus Station, Marcus's mind was already working on their next move. Their ship was docked in Bay 94, roughly 10 minutes away if they took the most direct route. But the most direct route would also take them past 3 security checkpoints that would certainly be locked down by now. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit were growing louder. Vaklari voices mixed with the mechanical announcements of station security, all overlaid with the constant wail of emergency sirens. Marcus could hear boots pounding on metal deck plates, getting closer with each passing second. "This way," he called to Danny, ducking into a maintenance corridor he'd used before during less dramatic escapes. The passage was narrow and poorly lit, designed for automated systems rather than foot traffic, but it would take them directly to the docking level while bypassing most of the main corridors. As they crawled through the cramped space, Danny finally found his voice again. "Marcus, they're going to come after us. The Vaklari don't forgive insults to their honor, and you just humiliated one of their sergeants in front of witnesses." Marcus nodded grimly as he worked to pry open a ventilation grate that led to the docking level. "I know, which is why we're leaving right now. But our cargo, our contacts, everything we've built here is worthless if we're dead." Marcus kicked the grate open and dropped through into an empty corridor lined with airlock doors. "Come on." Bay 94 was mercifully quiet when they arrived. Their ship, the Wandering Star, sat in its docking clamps like a sleeping metal bird. She wasn't much to look at, a converted cargo hauler with patches welded over old meteor damage and engines that protested loudly whenever asked to exceed standard cruise velocity. But she was fast enough, and more importantly, she was theirs. Marcus was halfway through the pre-flight sequence when Danny finally asked the question that had been hanging between them since the fight. "Who are you really, Marcus? I mean, I know you're my brother, but that back there, that wasn't a traitor defending himself. That was a soldier." Marcus paused in his checks of the navigation system, his hands still on the controls. Through the viewports, he could see security forces converging on their docking bay. They had maybe 3 minutes before those airlocks were sealed and their ship impounded. "Earth Defense Force, 8th Regiment, Close Combat Specialist," he said quietly. "3 tours in the frontier wars before I'm mustered out and went into trading. Why didn't you ever tell me?" Marcus engaged the engine startup sequence, feeling the familiar vibration as the Wandering Star came to life around them. "Because that part of my life was over. Or so I thought." The docking clamps released with a metallic clang, and Marcus guided their ship out of the bay just as the first security officers reached the airlock. Through the communication system, he could hear increasingly frantic demands for them to stop and return to the station for questioning. Instead, Marcus plotted a course for the edge of the system and engaged the sublight engines. Within minutes, Nexus Station was just another point of light in the vast darkness of space. Danny slumped in the co-pilot's chair, finally, allowing himself to process what had just happened. They were alive, they were free, but they'd also just made enemies of one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The Vaklari didn't forget grudges, and they had long memories for those who crossed them. So what now? Danny asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars that had been his home for so many years. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there an hour ago. Now we find out if 20 years was enough time for the galaxy to forget why humans were feared during the Frontier Wars. Behind them, Nexus Station grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely, swallowed by the infinite darkness of space. But Marcus knew their troubles were just beginning. Word of what had happened would spread through the galactic communication networks within hours. By tomorrow, every Vaklari ship in this sector would be looking for them. The peaceful trader Marcus Chun had died the moment he'd struck that first blow. In his place sat someone much more dangerous, a reminder of humanity's violent past, and a preview of what they might become if pushed too far. The wandering star jumped to hyperspace, carrying its two passengers toward an uncertain future and away from the relative safety of civilized space. Behind them, they left questions that would ripple through the galactic community for months to come. Questions about humanity's true nature, about the wisdom of underestimating a species that had fought its way to the stars, and about what happened when someone hurt a human's family. The answers to those questions would reshape the galaxy's understanding of Earth and its people. But first, Marcus and Danny had to survive long enough to provide them. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed around the wandering star as Marcus brought them back to normal space near the edge of the Kepler system. The transition always left him slightly nauseous, something about the way human brains process the impossible physics of faster-than-light travel. But he learned to work through it years ago. Beside him, Danny was gripping the armrest of his chair, his face pale and sweaty. "I'll never get used to that," Danny muttered, forcing himself to focus on the main display screen. "Where are we?" Marcus was already running sensor sweeps of the local area, checking for any signs of pursuit or other ships that might pose a threat. The Kepler system was officially uninhabited, but it served as an unofficial way station for smugglers, pirates, and others who preferred to conduct their business away from galactic authority. It was the perfect place to lay low while they figured out their next move. "About 30 light years from Nexus Station," Marcus replied, his fingers dancing over the navigation controls. "We should be safe here for a few hours while we plan our next jump." The main screen showed empty space scattered with asteroids and the distant glow of Kepler's orange dwarf star. No other ships showed up on their sensors, which was both reassuring and slightly surprising. Marcus had expected at least a few smuggler vessels or mining operations, but the system appeared genuinely deserted. Danny had recovered enough from the hyperspace jump to start asking the questions that Marcus had been dreading. "So, the Earth Defense Force. That's military, right?" "Combat troops. Special operations," Marcus confirmed, making small adjustments to their position to keep them hidden in the shadow of a large asteroid. "We were the ones they sent when negotiations failed and regular troops weren't enough." "How many aliens did you kill?" The blunt question hung in the air between them, like a physical presence. Marcus had known it was coming, but hearing it out loud still made him uncomfortable. His younger brother had grown up in a peaceful world where humanity's expansion into space was seen as a triumph of diplomacy and cooperation. The ugly reality of their early years among the stars wasn't something Earth's government liked to advertise. "Enough," Marcus said finally. The galaxy wasn't as welcoming to humanity as the history books make it sound. We had to fight for every trade route, every colony world, every seat at the negotiating table. Some species wanted to wipe us out entirely. Others just wanted to keep us confined to our own solar system. Danny was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "The Vaklari? We're actually one of the more reasonable ones, believe it or not. They respect strength, so once we proved we could fight back, they were willing to negotiate. The hegemony has been relatively stable partners ever since." Marcus paused, considering the implications of what had just happened. Or they were, until about 2 hours ago. The communication system suddenly crackled to life, causing both brothers to jump. A mechanical voice filled the cockpit, speaking in the clipped tones of an automated broadcast system. "Attention all vessels in Kepler system. By order of Vaklari Hegemony Fleet Command, you are directed to report any sightings of human vessel designation Wandering Star, registration number EDF 7439. Crew consists of 2 human males, wanted for assault on hegemony personnel. Reward offered for information leading to capture. Message repeats in 47 standard languages. Marcus felt his stomach drop. They'd been in hyperspace for less than 3 hours, but somehow the Viclari had already organized a system-wide manhunt that suggested either impressive efficiency or that this incident was being treated as far more serious than a simple bar fight. EDF registration? Danny asked, noting the designation. I thought you said you left the military 20 years ago. I did, but some paperwork follows you forever. Marcus was already plotting their next jump, calculating fuel consumption, and try to choose a destination that would buy them time to think. The Viclari have long memories and longer reach than I gave them credit for. The main screen chimed softly, indicating an incoming transmission on a military frequency that Marcus recognized but hadn't heard in decades. He hesitated before accepting the call, knowing that it could be a trap, but also curious about who might be trying to contact them on such an obscure channel. The face that appeared on the screen was older and more weathered than Marcus remembered, but still instantly recognizable. Colonel Sarah Martinez had been his commanding officer during the last year of his military service, and one of the few people who genuinely understood why he'd chosen to leave the service for civilian life. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying the same calm authority he remembered. "I was wondering when you'd surface again." "Coronel." Marcus straightened unconsciously, old habits reasserting themselves. "I didn't know you were still in the service." "General now, actually, and technically retired, though that's complicated." Martinez's eyes shifted to take in Danny, who was staring at the screen with obvious confusion. "Your brother, I assume? He looks like you did when you first enlisted. Young, angry, and completely unprepared for what's coming." "Sarah, General, with respect, what do you want? We're kind of in the middle of a situation here." Martinez smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I know exactly what situation you're in, Marcus. The whole galaxy knows by now. Viclari Sergeant Vorthak is in a medical facility on Nexus Station with a fractured skull and severe neural trauma. He may never fully recover." Danny made a small sound of shock, but Marcus kept his expression carefully neutral. He'd known the fight was serious, but he hadn't intended to inflict permanent damage. Then, again, when someone threatened his family, his training took over, and his training had been designed to end conflicts quickly and decisively. "He struck my brother," Marcus said simply. "I know. I've seen the security footage." Martinez leaned back in her chair, and for the first time, Marcus noticed she wasn't on a military vessel. The background looked civilian, possibly even a private residence. "You move like the old days, Marcus. Like the Wraith of Kepler-4. The nickname made Marcus wince. He'd earned it during a particularly brutal operation against Zephyrian pirates who'd been raiding human colonies. The mission had required him to infiltrate their base alone and eliminate 17 guards without raising an alarm. The surviving pirates had started calling him the Wraith after that, a reputation that had followed him for years. "That was a long time ago," Marcus said. "Not long enough, apparently. The Viclari High Command is treating this as an act of war, Marcus. They're claiming that an Earth military operative deliberately attacked their personnel in neutral space. I'm not military anymore. Your registration number says otherwise. Technically, you never actually left the service. You were transferred to inactive reserve status, which means you're still subject to military authority during times of crisis." Martinez's expression grew serious. "And, Marcus, we are very much in crisis right now." Danny finally found his voice. "What kind of crisis?" Martinez looked at him with the same assessing gaze she'd once used on new recruits. The kind where old soldiers get called back to active duty, and peaceful traders discover they're still warriors underneath. Marcus felt a familiar weight settling on his shoulders, the same burden he'd carried during his military years. "Sarah, please tell me you're not about to ask me to do something stupid. I'm about to ask you to do something necessary." The Viclari aren't the only ones who've been watching this incident. Every major power in the galaxy is analyzing the footage, trying to understand how a supposedly weak human trader dismantled one of their elite warriors in 15 seconds. Martinez paused, letting the implications sink in. They're remembering why they were afraid of us during the Frontier Wars. The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow. This wasn't just about revenge for a wounded soldier. This was about the careful balance of power that had kept the galaxy relatively peaceful for the last 2 decades. Humanity had bought their place at the negotiating table with blood and violence, but Then they deliberately stepped back, choosing trade and diplomacy over continued military expansion. Other species had grown comfortable with the idea that humans were no longer a threat. They want to test us, Marcus said slowly. The Viclari are using this incident as an excuse to see how far they can push humanity before we push back. Exactly. And right now, you two are the focal point of that test. What happens to you in the next few days will determine whether humanity maintains its current status in galactic politics or whether we get pushed back to Earth and told to stay there. Danny was looking back and forth between them, clearly lost. I don't understand. It was just a fight. One alien hit me, Marcus hit him back. Why is this suddenly about interstellar politics? Martinez answered before Marcus could. Because your brother didn't just hit back, son. He demonstrated combat techniques that most aliens thought were extinct. The Viclari have been spreading propaganda for years about how humans have grown soft, how we've forgotten how to fight. One 30-second video just proved them wrong, and now everyone wants to know what else we've been hiding. Marcus was already beginning to see where this conversation was headed. What do you need us to do? Survive first and foremost. The Viclari have 3 heavy cruisers and a dozen smaller vessels converging on your position. They'll be here within 6 hours. 6 hours? Marcus was already moving toward the navigation console. How is that possible? They've been mobilizing ships since before you even left Nexus Station. This was planned, Marcus. They deliberately provoked that fight, knowing who you were and what your likely response would be. The realization that he'd been manipulated made Marcus's hands clench into fists. Vorthak hadn't just been a bully looking for easy prey. He'd been bait, deliberately positioned to draw out exactly the kind of reaction that Marcus had provided. The question was why. They wanted to expose our military capabilities, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. They needed proof that Earth Defense Force veterans were still dangerous, so they could justify what? Preemptive strikes? Sanction? Demanding that we surrender our veterans to their custody? All of the above. The hegemony has been building support for a human containment initiative for months. They argue that our species is too violent and unpredictable to be allowed free movement through galactic space. This incident gives them the evidence they need to push that initiative through the Galactic Council. Danny was staring at Marcus with something approaching awe. So, when you hit that Viclari sergeant, you weren't just defending me. You were defending all of humanity. I was defending my brother, Marcus said firmly. Everything else is just politics. Martinez's voice cut through their conversation with military crispness. Politics that could get both of you killed if we don't handle this correctly. I'm transmitting coordinates for a rendezvous point in the Ross system. There's a small Earth Defense Force facility there, officially decommissioned but still functional. You want us to run to an EDF base? That'll just confirm the Viclari claims about military involvement. Marcus, you're already military involvement whether you like it or not. The question is whether you're going to face this alone or with backup. Martinez leaned forward, her expression intense. I've got 12 other veterans converging on the Ross facility, all of them called back to active duty as of 4 hours ago. Good soldiers who've been living civilian lives, but still remember their training. A squad reunion, Marcus said dryly. How nostalgic. The Wraith Pack, Martinez corrected, using the unofficial name his unit had earned during their most dangerous missions. And before you object, this wasn't my idea. This came from the highest levels of Earth government. The decision has been made to stop backing down from Viclari aggression, and you two just gave us the perfect excuse to remind the galaxy why that might not be wise. Marcus looked at his brother, seeing the mixture of fear and excitement in the young man's eyes. Danny had always complained that his life was boring, that he wanted to see real adventure among the stars. Now he was getting more adventure than he'd bargained for. What about Danny? He's not a soldier. He doesn't deserve to get caught up in this. With respect, General, Danny interrupted, I think I get to make that choice for myself. He turned to Marcus, his jaw set with determination. They hurt me first, remember? And for what you're telling me, they're going to hurt a lot more humans if someone doesn't stop them. Martinez nodded approvingly. Smart kid. He can stay at the Ross facility while you handle the tactical aspects of the mission. What mission? Marcus asked, though he was already beginning to suspect the answer. The Viclari have demanded that Earth surrender you for trial under hegemony law. Our government has refused, but they've given us 72 hours to resolve this situation before they move to more direct measures. Martinez's expression was grim. We have 3 days to prove that humanity isn't weak, isn't finished, and isn't going to be pushed around anymore. And how exactly do we do that? By showing the galaxy what happens when someone threatens a human's family. Martinez's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. Welcome back to active duty, Sergeant Chun. Try not to start a galactic war. The transmission ended, leaving Marcus and Danny alone with the weight of their new reality. Outside their viewports, space looked the same as it always had, infinite, beautiful, and utterly indifferent to the struggles of the tiny beings who traveled through it. But Marcus knew that appearances could be deceiving. Somewhere out there, Viclari warships were already moving to intercept them, carrying weapons that could turn their little cargo hauler into vapor in seconds. So, Ross system? Danny asked, trying to sound casual despite the circumstances. Marcus was already inputting the coordinates Martinez had provided. Ross system. And Danny? Yeah. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that I'd do it all again. You're my brother. Nobody gets to hurt you while I'm alive. Danny managed a shaky smile. Same here, Marcus. Though next time, maybe warn me before you turn into some kind of space ninja. Space ninja, Marcus repeated, allowing himself a small laugh as the wandering star prepared for another hyperspace jump. I'll have to tell the others about that one. As the stars elongated into lines and space folded around them once again, both brothers contemplated the strange turns their lives had taken. 24 hours ago, they'd been simple traders looking to make an honest living among the stars. Now they were fugitives carrying the hopes and fears of their entire species. Behind them, Viclari ships continued their pursuit, while ahead lay a rendezvous with ghosts from Marcus's past and a confrontation that would determine humanity's future among the stars. The galaxy was about to remember why it had once feared humans, and Marcus Chun was going to be the one to remind them. The Ross system had always been considered a backwater, a collection of dead worlds orbiting a dying red giant star that offered little of value to galactic civilization. The official records showed it as uninhabited, marked only as a navigational hazard due to the unpredictable solar flares that periodically erupted from the unstable star. What the records didn't mention was the small facility hidden in the shadow of Ross 3, a barren rock that had once served as an Earth Defense Force listening post during the Frontier Wars. Marcus guided the wandering star through the asteroid field that concealed the entrance to the facility, following navigation markers that hadn't been updated in 20 years, but still functioned perfectly. The technology might have been old, but EDF engineers had built things to last in those days, when every piece of equipment might mean the difference between survival and extinction. There, Danny said, pointing at the main display screen where a metallic structure had just become visible against the stark surface of the asteroid. Is that it? Firebase Omega. Marcus confirmed, feeling a wave of nostalgia as he recognized the familiar angular lines of the base. Home sweet home. For about 6 months during my second tour. The base looked exactly as he remembered it, a cluster of interconnected domes and corridors built directly into the asteroid's surface, with docking bays carved out of the solid rock. Defensive turrets tracked their approach automatically before recognizing their ship's transponder codes and powering down. Even after decades of disuse, the base's automated systems were still functioning. Marcus brought the wandering star into the largest docking bay, where artificial gravity and atmosphere were restored within moments of their arrival. Through the viewports, he could see other ships already present, military vessels that looked like they'd been pulled out of mothballs and hastily reactivated. Their hulls bore the scars of old battles, and their designs were clearly from the Frontier Wars era, but they still looked deadly. How many people are we talking about here? Danny asked as they went through the shutdown sequence. Martinez said 12 veterans, plus support staff. Maybe 20 people total. Marcus sealed the ship and activated its security systems. That's assuming everyone she contacted actually showed up. They made their way through the airlock and into the facility proper, their footsteps echoing in corridors that had been silent for years. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows on the walls, and Marcus could hear the hum of life support systems working overtime to process the sudden influx of occupants. The air smelled of recycled atmosphere and military-grade cleaning solutions, a combination that triggered memories he'd thought he'd forgotten. Marcus Chun, you magnificent bastard. The voice came from behind them, and Marcus turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows of a side corridor. Captain Lisa Park looked older than when he'd last seen her, with gray threading through her black hair and new lines around her eyes, but she still moved with the fluid grace of a born fighter. She'd been the Wraith Pack's intelligence specialist, capable of infiltrating enemy facilities and gathering information that had saved countless lives. Lisa. Marcus found himself grinning despite their circumstances. Still sneaking up on people, I see. Some habits are hard to break. She embraced him briefly, then stepped back to study Danny with professional interest. Your brother, I assume? He's got the same stubborn look you had when you first enlisted. Danny, meet Captain Park. Lisa, my brother Danny. Lisa shook Danny's hand, her grip firm and assessing. The kid who started an interstellar incident by getting punched in the face. I have to admit, that takes a special kind of talent. Hey, I didn't start anything, Danny protested. I was just standing there when that overgrown lizard decided to use me as a punching bag. And Marcus decided to demonstrate why that was a bad idea. Lisa said, her smile turning predatory. I saw the security footage. Beautiful work, by the way. That sergeant will be eating through a tube for months. Marcus felt a twinge of guilt at the reminder of the permanent damage he'd inflicted, but it was quickly overwhelmed by the memory of watching his brother's blood on the station corridor. He'd do it again without hesitation. Who else is here? He asked. Most of the old crew. Torres and Williams arrived yesterday. Singh flew in this morning, and Rodriguez has been here for a week helping to get the base operational. Lisa started walking toward the central command area, gesturing for them to follow. A few couldn't make it. Chin's on a deep space mission. Patterson died in a mining accident 3 years ago, and nobody could locate Morrison. Marcus nodded, processing the information. The Wraith Pack had been an elite unit during the Frontier Wars, specializing in operations that regular forces couldn't handle. They'd earned their reputation through a combination of superior training, innovative tactics, and a willingness to take risks that more conventional units wouldn't consider. If Martinez had managed to reassemble most of the original team, they'd have capabilities that few people in the galaxy could match. The command center hadn't changed much since Marcus's last visit. Banks of monitors and control stations surrounded a central holographic display table that could project three-dimensional tactical information with impressive detail. Most of the screens were dark, but a few showed long-range sensor data and communication intercepts that painted a picture of increasing tension throughout the local sector. Marcus, another familiar voice called out, and he turned to see Sergeant Elena Rodriguez approaching from one of the side stations. She'd been the team's demolitions expert, with an intuitive understanding of explosives that bordered on supernatural. About time you showed up. We were starting to think you'd gone soft in your civilian years. Just because I haven't blown anything up lately doesn't mean I've forgotten how, Marcus replied, accepting another brief embrace. Though for what I hear, we might be getting plenty of practice soon. That's putting it mildly. The new voice belonged to Lieutenant James Torres, the team's communications specialist and electronics expert. He emerged from behind a bank of monitoring equipment, his arms covered in grease from some repair work. The Viclari had been flooding the subspace networks with propaganda about the incident. They're painting you as everything from a military assassin to a terrorist cell leader. Terrorist cell leader? Danny looked bemused. It was one punch. One punch that fractured 3 bones and caused permanent neural damage, Torres clarified. The medical reports make it sound like Marcus used some kind of exotic weapon instead of his bare hands. The exotic weapon was training, said a voice from the entrance to the command center. General Martinez had arrived, accompanied by a man Marcus didn't immediately recognize, tall, lean, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command but wearing civilian clothes. General, Marcus said, coming to attention automatically. At ease, Sergeant. We're all friends here. Martinez gestured to her companion. I'd like you to meet Ambassador David Wright, Earth's special envoy to the Galactic Council. He's here to brief us on the political situation. Wright stepped forward, his expression serious. Sergeant Shun, your actions have created quite a stir in diplomatic circles. The Viclari are demanding your immediate extradition, while several other species are quietly encouraging Earth to stand firm. Everyone wants to see how this plays out. Why? Marcus asked. It was a personal dispute, not an act of war. Because personal disputes between individuals can sometimes reveal larger truths about their species, Wright explained. The galaxy has spent 20 years convinced that humans have become peaceful traders and diplomats. One security recording has reminded everyone that we're descended from persistence hunters who conquered our own planet through violence and cunning. Lisa moved to one of the control stations and activated the central holographic display. A three-dimensional map of the local galactic sector appeared, dotted with icons representing various military forces and political boundaries. Several red markers indicated Viclari's ships, and Marcus was disturbed to see how many of them were converging on their general location. Current situation, Lisa announced in her professional briefing voice. Viclari fleet elements include the heavy cruiser's dominant force, Iron Resolve, and Crushing Victory, plus supporting destroyers and frigates. Total estimated firepower equivalent to a standard Earth battle group. That's a lot of ships for one fugitive cargo hauler, Danny observed. It's not about capturing us, Marcus realized, studying the tactical display. They're making a statement. All that firepower isn't meant to ensure they catch us. It's meant to demonstrate what happens to anyone who challenges Viclari authority. Wright nodded approvingly. Exactly right, Sergeant. This is psychological warfare on a galactic scale. The Viclari want every species in this sector to see what their response looks like when humans get violent. So what's our response going to be? Elena asked, her hand unconsciously moving to where she used to carry her demolition charges. Martinez moved to the central console and input a series of commands. The holographic display zoomed in on a specific region of space, highlighting a trade route that Marcus recognized as one of the busiest in the sector. The Viclari fleet is protecting their most important supply convoy, Martinez explained. 3 massive cargo vessels carrying rare minerals from their mining colonies to their industrial worlds. The convoy is worth approximately 50 billion credits, and losing it would severely impact their military production capabilities. Marcus felt a familiar tingle of anticipation as he began to understand what Martinez was suggesting. You want us to hit the convoy. I want you to remind the galaxy why humans were feared during the Frontier Wars, Martinez corrected. A small force using superior tactics and training to achieve a strategically impossible victory. The kind of operation that the Wraith Pack specialized in. It's suicide, Torres said flatly. Even if we could somehow get past their escorts, we don't have the firepower to threaten ships that size. We don't need to destroy them, Elena said, her eyes lighting up with professional interest as she studied the convoy specifications. We just need to make them disappear. Marcus was already running tactical calculations in his head, considering approach vectors and timing requirements. It was the kind of operation he'd planned dozens of times during the Frontier Wars. High risk, high reward, and completely dependent on speed, surprise, and flawless execution. The convoy is protected by a squadron of destroyers, he said, pointing to the escort ships shown on the display. Standard Viclari formation, with the cargo ships in the center and the warships arranged in a defensive perimeter. If we could somehow get inside that perimeter. The cargo ships have minimal defensive capabilities, Lisa added, accessing the intelligence database. They're built for capacity, not protection. A single torpedo in the right location could disable their engines without destroying the ship itself. Wright looked between them with growing concern. Are you seriously considering attacking a civilian convoy? The diplomatic implications alone would demonstrate that Earth doesn't back down from threats, Martinez interrupted. Ambassador, with respect, diplomacy has failed. The Viclari have made it clear that they intend to treat this incident as justification for restricting human movement throughout galactic space. We can either accept that restriction, or we can remind them why restricting human movement might not be in their best interests. Danny had been quiet throughout the discussion, but now he stepped forward. What about me? I'm not a soldier. I don't know how to fight alien warships or sneak past military defenses. Marcus looked at his brother, seeing the mixture of fear and determination in his eyes. You're going to stay here, where it's safe. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. Danny's voice carried an echo of the same stubbornness that had gotten them into this situation. That Viclari bastard hit me because he thought humans were weak. If we're going to prove him wrong, then I want to be part of it. Danny, this isn't a game. I know exactly what this is, Danny interrupted. This is about whether humanity gets to keep its place in galactic civilization or gets pushed back to Earth like children who can't play nicely with others. And it all started because someone hurt me and you stood up for me. The command center fell silent as everyone processed the simple truth in Danny's words. This wasn't really about military tactics or political maneuvering. This was about family and the lengths that humans would go to protect the people they cared about. He comes with us, Martinez said finally. Not as a combatant, but as a reminder of why we're doing this. The galaxy needs to see that we're not just soldiers or diplomats. We're people with families and loved ones, and we protect what matters to us. Elena grinned and clapped Danny on the shoulder. Welcome to the Wraith Pack, kid. Try not to get us all killed. Marcus felt a familiar weight settling over him as the reality of the situation became clear. In a few hours, they'd be launching an attack against impossible odds, gambling their lives and potentially humanity's future on a desperate plan that would either cement their species' reputation or destroy it entirely. But as he looked around the command center at the faces of his old teammates, soldiers who'd answered the call despite decades of peaceful civilian lives, he felt something else. Pride. These people had given up comfortable, safe existences to stand with him when the stakes couldn't be higher. All right, Marcus said, moving to the tactical console. Let's remind the galaxy why they used to be afraid of humans. The planning session that followed would last for hours, as 8 veterans and 1 civilian worked to devise a strategy that could achieve the impossible. Outside, Vaklari ships continued their search, while across the galaxy, entire species watched and waited to see what humanity would do when pushed into a corner. The answer, as they were about to discover, was something that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The assault began 18 hours later, in the deep space between star systems where the Vaklari convoy traveled along one of their most secure trade routes. Marcus floated in zero gravity inside the cramped confines of a military boarding pod, surrounded by 5 other members of the Wraith Pack, and enough explosives to level a city block. The pod itself was a relic from the Frontier Wars, a stealth-capable insertion vehicle designed to deliver soldiers directly onto enemy ships without being detected. 2 minutes to target. Lisa's voice crackled through their communication system from the pod's control station. All systems green, stealth field holding steady. Through the pod's small viewport, Marcus could see their target, the Vaklari cargo vessel Profitable Enterprise, a massive ship nearly 2 kilometers long and packed with the rare minerals that fueled the hegemony's war machine. It looked like a flying mountain, its dark hull studded with cargo containers and defensive turrets that could vaporize their tiny pod in seconds if they were detected. Remember the plan? Marcus said quietly, checking his assault rifle one final time. We're not here to destroy the ship or kill the crew. We're here to make a statement. Elena Rodriguez floated nearby, her demolition equipment secured in waterproof cases. 30 seconds to place the charges, 2 minutes to reach the engine compartment, 5 minutes total before their security forces respond. Assuming everything goes perfectly. When has anything ever gone perfectly? Torres muttered, adjusting his electronic warfare gear. These ships have automated defense systems that could detect a microbe if it looks suspicious. That's why we're not going to look suspicious, Marcus replied. The plan they developed was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of trying to fight their way past the convoy's military escorts, they would insert directly onto the cargo ship and disable it from the inside. By the time the Vaklari realized what was happening, the Wraith Pack would be gone, and the Enterprise would be drifting helplessly in space. 30 seconds, Lisa announced. Final systems check. Marcus verified his equipment one last time. In addition to his rifle and standard combat gear, he carried a data package that would be transmitted to every major news network in the galaxy once they completed their mission. The package contained footage of the original incident on Nexus Station, along with documentation proving that the Vaklari had deliberately provoked the confrontation as part of a larger campaign to restrict human movement through galactic space. 10 seconds. Good hunting, Wraiths. The pod shuddered slightly as Lisa fired the maneuvering thrusters, bringing them alongside the Enterprise's hull at a maintenance airlock that their intelligence suggested would be unguarded. The stealth field flickered and died as they made physical contact with the ship, but by then, it was too late for the Vaklari sensors to detect them. Airlock sealed, Rodriguez reported as she worked to override the security systems. Atmosphere on the other side is breathable for humans. Emergency lighting only, which suggests this section is currently unoccupied. Marcus checked his chronometer. They had exactly 23 minutes before the convoy was scheduled to drop out of hyperspace for a routine navigation update. If they weren't finished by then, they'd be facing not just the Enterprise's crew, but also the destroyers that were escorting the convoy. "Move," Marcus ordered, leading his team through the airlock and into the ship's interior. The inside of the Enterprise was a maze of corridors and cargo holds, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Their route to the engine compartment would take them through several sections of the ship, each with its own security systems and potential crew members. According to their intelligence, a Vaklari cargo ship typically carried a crew of 200, most of them concentrated in the forward sections near the bridge and crew quarters. They moved through the corridors with the silent efficiency that had made them legendary during the Frontier Wars. Each member of the team knew their role perfectly, and they flowed around obstacles and potential threats like water, finding the path of least resistance. "Contact ahead," Williams whispered, holding up a closed fist to signal the team to stop. Around the corner, they could hear the distinctive, rumbling voices of Vaklari crew members conducting routine maintenance. Marcus made a series of hand signals, and the team split up to bypass the patrol. 3 minutes later, they regrouped at the entrance to the engine section, having successfully avoided detection. "Too easy," Torres muttered as Rodriguez began working on the blast doors that protected the ship's most critical systems. "Don't jinx it," Elena replied, but Marcus could hear the same concern in her voice. The Vaklari were known for their thoroughness and military discipline. A security breach this successful suggested either incredible luck or that they were walking into a trap. The blast doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing the Enterprise's massive engine compartment. The space was enormous, filled with the humming machinery that provided power and propulsion for the gigantic vessel. Conduits carrying plasma and coolant snaked between massive generators, and the air thrummed with barely contained energy. There, Marcus pointed to a cluster of control systems near the center of the compartment. "Primary engine controls. Rodriguez, start placing your charges. Torres, see if you can access their communication systems. I want to send our message before we leave." The team spread out through the engine compartment, each focusing on their assigned objectives. Rodriguez began placing shaped charges at critical points in the engine assembly, designed to disable the systems without causing a catastrophic explosion. Torres connected his equipment to a maintenance terminal and started working his way through the Enterprise's security protocols. Marcus positioned himself near the entrance, watching for any signs that they'd been discovered. According to their intelligence, they still had 15 minutes before the convoy dropped out of hyperspace, which should be more than enough time to complete their mission and escape. That was when the lights came on. Suddenly, the engine compartment was flooded with brilliant white light, and klaxons began wailing throughout the ship. Heavy blast doors slammed shut at every entrance, trapping the Wraith Pack inside the compartment with no way to escape. "Contact!" Williams shouted, raising his rifle toward a service gantry where armed figures were already taking position. But these weren't ordinary Vaklari crew members. They were wearing the distinctive armor of Hegemony Special Forces, and their weapons were already trained on the human infiltrators. "Humans of the Wraith Pack," a voice boomed through the compartment's communication system, speaking perfect English without a translator's mechanical undertones. "You're surrounded and outgunned. Surrender immediately, and you'll be treated according to the Galactic Conventions governing prisoners of war." Marcus's mind raced as he assessed their situation. They were trapped in an enclosed space with no cover, facing an unknown number of enemy soldiers who'd clearly been expecting them. This wasn't a successful infiltration, it was an ambush. "How did they know?" Elena asked quietly, her hand moving toward her sidearm despite the hopelessness of their situation. "The same way they knew to provoke the original incident," Marcus realized. "This whole thing has been a setup from the beginning. They wanted us to attack this convoy." "But why?" Torres demanded, his fingers still working frantically at his terminal despite the weapons pointed at them. The answer came from an unexpected source. General Martinez's voice crackled through their communication system, but she wasn't speaking to them. She was broadcasting on an open channel that would be received throughout the star system. "Attention, Vaklari forces. This is General Sarah Martinez of the Earth Defense Force. You are currently holding 8 human soldiers who were conducting a legitimate military operation against a strategic target. I demand their immediate release." Marcus felt his stomach drop as he understood what was happening. Martinez wasn't trying to rescue them. She was announcing their presence to the entire galaxy. Every major power would be monitoring this system now, watching to see how the confrontation played out. "General Martinez," the Vaklari commander replied, his voice carrying across the same open channel. Your soldiers are trespassing on hegemony territory and have committed acts of sabotage against civilian vessels. They will be transferred to hegemony custody for trial. Negative. Earth does not recognize Vaklari jurisdiction over its military personnel. Release them immediately or face the consequences. Marcus exchanged glances with his teammates, seeing the same realization in their eyes. They weren't prisoners, they were pawns in a much larger game. Martinez had sent them here knowing they would be captured, using their situation to force a confrontation that would reveal the true balance of power between humanity and the Vaklari hegemony. Torres, how long do you need to send our data package? Marcus asked quietly. 2 minutes, maybe 3. But they'll detect the transmission immediately. Do it. As Torres worked frantically at his terminal, Marcus studied the Vaklari soldiers surrounding them. Special Forces troops? Definitely, but not as many as he'd initially thought. Maybe 12, possibly 15. Still overwhelming odds, but not impossible if they could create enough confusion to level the playing field. Elena, when I give the signal, I want you to detonate one of your smaller charges. Not enough to damage the ship, just enough to create a distraction. Rodriguez nodded, her hand moving to her demolition control unit. Ready. Williams, Singh, when the lights go out, I want you to take the soldiers on the left side of the compartment. Lisa, and I will take the right. Torres, keep working on that transmission no matter what happens. The next few seconds stretched out like hours as Marcus waited for the perfect moment. The Vaklari soldiers were confident in their superior position, but they'd made the classic mistake of underestimating human adaptability under pressure. Now, Marcus whispered. The compartment exploded into chaos as Rodriguez's charge detonated somewhere in the ship's superstructure, plunging everything into darkness and causing enough vibration to throw everyone off balance. The Wraith Pack moved with the fluid precision of soldiers who'd trained together for years, each member instinctively knowing where their teammates would be and what they would do. Marcus's first shot took down a Vaklari soldier who was trying to activate emergency lighting. His second and third eliminated threats that were moving to flank Torres's position. Around him, he could hear the distinctive sound of his teammates' weapons as they engaged targets with surgical precision. Transmission sent. Torres called out over the noise of combat. Data package is broadcasting on all frequencies. The fighting lasted less than 30 seconds, but when the emergency lights finally came back on, 8 of the 12 Vaklari soldiers were down, and the rest had retreated to defensive positions behind the engine machinery. The Wraith Pack had taken casualties. Singh was wounded in the leg, and Williams had a nasty gash on his forehead from flying debris, but they were still operational. This is Commander Vortek of Hegemony Special Forces, a voice called from somewhere among the engine assemblies. Marcus recognized the name. This was the brother of the sergeant he'd fought on Nexus Station. You have just committed murder against military personnel. Any hope of a peaceful resolution to this situation has ended. This is Sergeant Marcus Chun of the Earth Defense Force. Marcus replied, moving to a better position while keeping his rifle trained on potential threats. Your brother attacked my family. You ambushed my team. I'd say we're even. You know nothing about honor, human. But you will learn before you die. The standoff that followed would have continued indefinitely, except that Torres's data transmission had accomplished exactly what Martinez had intended. Every major news network in the galaxy was now broadcasting footage of the original incident, along with documentation proving that the Vaklari had manipulated the situation from the beginning. More importantly, other ships were beginning to arrive in the system. Earth Defense Force vessels that hadn't been seen outside of human space for 20 years, moving with the deadly grace of warships designed for combat rather than peacekeeping. All Vaklari forces. Martinez's voice came through the communication system again. This is your final warning. Release our personnel immediately, or face the full response of the Earth Defense Force. General Martinez, Commander Vortek replied, you are threatening a hegemony vessel in neutral space. This is an act of war. No, Commander. This is a reminder that humans protect their own, no matter the cost. You have 60 seconds to comply. Marcus watched the chronometer on his display as the seconds ticked away. Around him, his teammates maintained their defensive positions, ready to fight to the end if necessary. But Marcus found himself thinking about Danny, safe back at Firebase Omega, and about all the other humans scattered across the galaxy who were watching these events unfold. With 30 seconds left on Martinez's ultimatum, everything changed. All hegemony forces, this is Admiral Kethin of the Vaklari High Command. A new voice announced on the open channel. Stand down immediately and release the human prisoners. Marcus heard Commander Vortex's sharp intake of breath. Admiral Kethin was one of the most respected military leaders in the Vaklari hegemony, and his orders carried the weight of absolute authority. Admiral, Vortex protested, these humans have demonstrated exactly why the hegemony should not have attempted to manipulate them in the first place. Kethin interrupted. Commander, your operation was unauthorized and has created a diplomatic crisis that threatens the stability of this entire sector. Release the humans immediately. The engine compartment fell silent as everyone processed this unexpected development. Marcus could see the confusion and anger on the faces of the remaining Vaklari soldiers, but military discipline held them in place. Admiral, Martinez's voice carried a note of surprised respect. We appreciate your intervention. Our forces will withdraw once our personnel are safely returned. General Martinez, I believe we have much to discuss regarding future relations between our species. Perhaps it is time for both sides to acknowledge that the old assumptions about human capabilities may no longer be accurate. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him as he realized that the crisis was ending not in violence, but in a fundamental shift in galactic politics. The Vaklari had learned that humans were not the peaceful traitors they'd appear to be, while humanity had demonstrated that they would not be intimidated or manipulated by stronger powers. Wraith Pack, this is General Martinez. Prepare for extraction. Your mission is complete. As Marcus and his team began collecting their gear and preparing to leave the Enterprise, he reflected on how much had changed since that moment on Nexus Station when a Vaklari sergeant had struck his brother. What had started as a personal defense of family had somehow evolved into a galactic statement about human nature and capabilities. The galaxy would never again make the mistake of underestimating humanity's willingness to fight for what mattered to them. And Marcus Chund, the quiet traitor who just wanted to protect his younger brother, had become the catalyst for humanity's emergence as a true military power among the stars. The Wraith Pack was going home, but their legend was just beginning to spread across the galaxy, carried by news reports and whispered stories that would reshape how every species viewed the humans walking among them. 6 months later, Marcus Chin stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned Earth battleship Defiant, watching as the massive vessel prepared to depart from Luna shipyards. The ship represented everything that had changed since the incident on Nexus Station, sleek, powerful, and designed with technologies that humanity had kept hidden for decades. Around him, officers from a dozen different species worked alongside human crew members, part of the new multi-species defense initiative that had emerged from the diplomatic aftermath of the Vaklari crisis. Still hard to believe sometimes, Danny said, joining his brother at the observation windows. The younger Chun had spent the last 6 months at the Earth Defense Force Academy, fast-tracked through officer training, and now wearing the uniform of a junior lieutenant in the intelligence division. A year ago, we were hauling cargo between backwater stations. Now look at this. The view outside was indeed impressive. The Defiant was one of 12 new battleships under construction, each one incorporating advances in weapons, shields, and propulsion that had been theoretical concepts just months earlier. Earth's shipyards, dormant for 20 years, were working around the clock to rebuild humanity's military presence in space. General Martinez was right about one thing, Marcus said, adjusting the collar of his own new uniform. His promotion to colonel had come with command of the reformed Wraith Pack, now expanded to a full special operations division with recruits from dozens of species. Once the galaxy remembered what humans were capable of, everything changed. Through the massive viewports, they could see representatives from the Galactic Council arriving for the Defiant's commissioning ceremony. Zephyrian delegates floated in their environmental suits, while hegemony representatives moved with characteristic military precision. Even the mysterious Etherians had sent observers, their crystalline forms glittering in the artificial light. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of political negotiations, military reorganization, and cultural exchange. The revelation that humanity possessed advanced military capabilities had forced every major power to reconsider their assumptions about Earth's role in galactic civilization. Some species had responded with suspicion and fear, but many others had approached humanity with offers of alliance and partnership. Colonel Chun, Please report to Conference Room Alpha. A voice announced over the ship's communication system. The council delegation is ready for the final briefing. Marcus straightened his uniform and prepared to leave, but Danny caught his arm. Marcus, I need to ask you something. Do you ever regret what happened that day? The fight with Vorthak, I mean. Marcus considered the question carefully. In the months since Nexus Station, he'd been asked similar questions by reporters, diplomats, and military analysts from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to understand the psychological factors that had driven a peaceful trader to violence, and whether that violence represented humanity's true nature. I regret that it was necessary, Marcus said finally. But I don't regret protecting you. I never will. Even knowing what it would lead to, the military buildup, the political tensions, the fact that some species now see us as a threat instead of trading partners. Marcus looked out at the assembled fleet, where ships bearing the flags of a dozen different worlds worked together on joint training exercises. Danny, every species in this galaxy had to fight for their place at some point. The Vaklari built their hegemony through conquest. The Zephyrians dominated trade routes through economic warfare. The Etherians controlled information and technology to maintain their superiority. He paused, watching as a squadron of human fighters executed a perfect formation flight alongside alien vessels that had once been considered impossibly advanced. We tried to skip that step, Marcus continued. We thought we could earn respect through peaceful cooperation and gradual integration. But the galaxy doesn't work that way. Respect has to be earned through strength, and strength sometimes requires violence. Danny nodded slowly. So you think the galaxy is better off now? With humans as a military power instead of just traders and diplomats? I think the galaxy is more honest now. We're not pretending to be something we're not, and other species aren't pretending we're harmless. That a better foundation for real cooperation. Conference Room Alpha was one of the Defiant's most impressive spaces, with holographic displays capable of showing tactical information from anywhere in the galaxy. When Marcus arrived, he found representatives from 7 different species seated around the central table, each studying data tablets and murmuring quiet conversations. Admiral Kethan of the Vaklari hegemony stood as Marcus entered, offering a respectful nod. The relationship between the Admiral and the human military had evolved considerably since their first confrontation. Kethan had become one of humanity's strongest advocates within the hegemony, arguing that Earth's military capabilities made them valuable allies rather than dangerous enemies. Colonel Chun, Kethan said in accented but fluent English, I trust you're satisfied with the new ship? She's quite impressive for a vessel built in such a short time frame. Your technical advisors were very helpful during the design process, Marcus replied diplomatically. The truth was that the Defiant incorporated Vaklari shield technology, Zephyrian navigation systems, and Etherian computational matrices, a level of technological cooperation that would have been impossible before the Nexus Station incident. Please, everyone take your seats, General Martinez said as she entered the conference room. She'd been promoted to Supreme Allied Commander, overseeing the new multi-species defense initiative that was reshaping galactic military doctrine. We have a lot to cover before the commissioning ceremony. The briefing that followed dealt with the current state of galactic security, including several emerging threats that had appeared in the months since humanity's military revival. Piracy was increasing in several outer sectors, apparently taking advantage of the political instability caused by shifting power balances. More concerning were reports of unidentified ships operating in deep space, using technologies that didn't match any known species. Our intelligence suggests these unknown vessels may be from beyond the galactic rim, reported Captain Park, who now headed the Multi-Species Intelligence Division. If that's accurate, we may be facing contact with an entirely new civilization. The assembled representatives murmured among themselves at this news. First contact protocols had been established decades ago, but they were designed around the assumption that new species will be discovered gradually through normal exploration activities. The possibility of contact with an advanced civilization that possessed superior technology was something no one had prepared for, which is why this initiative is so important, Martinez continued. Individually, each of our species has strengths and weaknesses. Together, we represent the combined knowledge and capabilities of galactic civilization. Marcus found himself thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A simple fight between two individuals had somehow evolved into the foundation for unprecedented cooperation between species that had been suspicious neighbors for centuries. It was almost impossible to believe that so much had changed because of 15 seconds of violence on a space station. Colonel Chin, Admiral Kethin, addressed him directly. I understand your brother will be serving aboard this vessel? Lieutenant Chun will be part of the intelligence staff, Marcus confirmed. Though I should mention that he's specifically requested assignment to first contact protocols. He seems to think that understanding alien psychology might help prevent future misunderstandings. Kethin's expression shifted to what Marcus had learned to recognize as the Vaklari equivalent of smile. Your brother shows wisdom beyond his years. Perhaps if more beings understood each other's motivations, we could avoid the kind of incident that brought us all together. The briefing continued for another hour, covering everything from supply logistics to communication protocols for the joint fleet operations. When it finally concluded, Marcus found himself walking toward the commissioning ceremony with a profound sense of how much his life had changed. The ceremony itself was a spectacular affair, with representatives from dozens of species gathered to witness the formal activation of humanity's newest warship. Admiral Kethin stood beside General Martinez as they jointly activated the ship's main systems, symbolizing the new cooperation between former adversaries. As the Defiant's engines came online and the massive vessel began its maiden voyage, Marcus watched the assembled crowd with professional interest. Diplomats who had once dismissed humanity as irrelevant now studied every human present, trying to understand the psychology of a species that could shift from peaceful trading to military action in a matter of hours. Impressive turnout, Danny observed, joining him near the viewing area. Though I notice a lot of them keep staring at you specifically. Marcus had noticed the same thing. Since the Nexus Station incident, he'd become something of a celebrity throughout galactic civilization. News networks had dubbed him everything from the human who changed everything to the traitor who broke the peace. Children of various species apparently played games involving recreating his fight with Sergeant Vorthak, though their parents usually didn't approve. Fame is a strange thing, Marcus said. A year ago, nobody outside our small trading circle knew my name. Now, I can't visit a space station without being recognized. Do you miss it? The anonymity, I mean. Marcus considered the question as he watched the stars wheel past the observation windows. The Defiant was beginning its first patrol mission, part of a joint fleet that would spend the next several months conducting training exercises and showing the flag throughout the local sector. Sometimes, he admitted, but this feels more honest. For 20 years, I pretended to be something I wasn't. Now everyone knows exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. And were you capable of? The question came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Wright had approached them during their conversation, apparently curious about the psychological aspects of the situation that had consumed his diplomatic career for the past 6 months. I'm capable of protecting the people I care about, Marcus said simply. Everything else is just details. Wright nodded thoughtfully. In all my years as a diplomat, I've learned